Okay, let's get settled into our seats. I know there's a lot of debate taking place throughout the afternoon, but we have two public-private sessions that are taking place. This is the first of the two, and the public-private participation is essential. I say good afternoon to excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the public-private dialogue on a just and inclusive energy transition. This is in conjunction, of course, with the 13th session of the ARENA Assembly. I'm John Defterios, the former emerging markets editor of CNN and now a professor of business at NYU here in Abu Dhabi, and also a World Economic Forum Energy Fellow, focused entirely, by the way, on the energy transition within the WEF community. I'll be moderating, of course, this session, and I'm delighted to welcome you all in person after 2 years of virtual events. So we kind of prided ourselves within IRENA to have this face-to-face dialogue, and it got lost for the last couple of years. And I think time was almost frozen during that period of time as well, right? It seems compressed, where we had 5 years, not just 2. My involvement, by the way, with ARENA stretches back almost a decade, and I am delighted to be working alongside the Director General and, of course, Rabia, who are very, very strong advocates of a just transition. Now, for those who may be new to this forum, the public-private dialogue is a key platform for leading government, industry, and labor actors to discuss the most pressing issues, trends, and actions in the renewable energy space. Today, we focus our discussion on how the energy transition will transform the world of work, the challenges we've seen today, but the opportunities if we get policies right of tomorrow, global energy crisis, and an intensifying climate event, or shall we say in the plural events, underscore the interlinkages of society, the economy, and the planet. It is increasingly recognized that we need an energy transition that is just for workers and communities, where benefits are shared equitably and the burdens of adjustment minimized. But as we found out during the last 2 COPs in particular, which I've been involved with, how does that translate into practice? Let's open our session here with the Director General. Francesco, the floor is yours, and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome all you to IRENA's 6th higher-level public-private dialogue. Allow me, as I begin, to thank John to have accepted to be here with us. I think there could be no General Assembly without John. So this is something that will stay forever. And you know, when we have a meeting that is difficult to moderate because we have many interventions and on subject of great importance. This one, I think John is the first that we call and play asking him as we can to be with us. So thanks for being with us, John.
Thank you.
Today's dialogues bring together public stakeholders, the private and non-profit sector, and labor representatives to explore how we can achieve an energy transition that is just. A year ago, we dedicated our discussion to the circularity and yet life management of renewables. We recognize that in order for the renewable energy industry to be truly sustainable, we must think about it from cradle to grave. Today, we focus on the social pillar of sustainability. As we transition from fossil fuels, our economies are being profoundly transformed. This has major implications in the world of work. There is a growing international agreement that energy transition must be just for workers and communities, providing decent jobs and protecting livelihood. Government, business, trade unions, and workers all have a key role to play, not only in driving the energy transition, but also in influencing how it will unfold. We need to tackle climate change with justice and equity consideration in mind. Our analysis showed that more jobs will be created than lost during the energy transition. However, we need to recognize that it can create winners and losers. Proactive efforts are therefore needed to address potential misalignments, protect affected communities, and ensure that benefits and costs are shared in a fair and equitable way. Today, we will put the needs of people at the core of the discussion. We convene to hear your perspective on these critical questions. How to tackle misalignment and protect workers' interests and livelihoods? What skill do we need to drive the energy transition? How we can ensure that newly created jobs are good jobs? So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, experience, insight on this and other questions. Having always in mind that at the end, just transition also means that we can realize a work that will be less unequal than today. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude for the continuous efforts of members of ARENA's Coalition for Action and the Legislative Forum who made this event possible. I would like to extend my thanks to all you joining us today. Thanks, and back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Director General. I can recall, and it seems like a long time ago, but it actually wasn't, when during the pandemic, I had called the Director General to come to my apartment because that's where I was broadcasting from. So it was such a surreal moment to talk about the energy transition and the energy crisis we were in today. But my last major project for CNN, which finished up during the pandemic, was the Global Energy Challenge, which was a 1.5-year long series where I traveled the world focusing on the transition itself. And it was 4 documentaries going to China, India, Europe, and to the United States, 30 reports. And it was focusing on part of this. How do you equip the developing world to be able to adjust to the new realities of today and to make sure that there's a transfer of funds from the global north to the global south to make it happen? I'm glad we've agreed on the terms of a $100 billion transfer, but whether those funds get put into the coffers, I think is crucial to see it on a continuous basis. I know that was part of the debate in the last 2-hour session. We know that ARENA has been leading the analysis of the socioeconomic dimension of the energy transition over the last decade. In fact, for the Global Energy Challenge that I did for CNN, they were a collaborative partner on the research that kind of built that series. Its work on renewable energy, jobs, and gender provides solid data analysis on renewable energy impacts on the world of work. The Coalition for Action network of key renewable energy players also focused on a just transition last year, and we are pleased to see many coalition members present today. Well, the underlying principle that all voices must be heard, labor unions, the private sector, and government representatives got together in a series of coalition webinars to share good practices as well as raise their concerns. The coalition will shortly be launching a brief summarizing of those perspectives in the very near future. It is my pleasure now to invite to the podium Rabia Faruqi. She's the director of ARENA's Knowledge, Policy, and Finance Center for a scene-setting presentation that will share findings from ARENA's latest work on jobs and gender. She will also provide some key insights from the coalition's upcoming brief on a just transition. And then the floor is theirs, right? We have the dialogue amongst everybody else thereafter. Rabia, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. Thank you also for accepting to moderate. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really happy to be here with this specific topic, which I think is gaining importance. I mean, as most of you know, at ARENA, we have been pushing or highlighting, let's say, the argument that the energy transition goes beyond technology and costs, and we also need to focus on the socioeconomic impact of the energy transition and all the implications around international economic order, around international trade, etc. And I think now it's becoming mainstream, and I'm really glad to see many very conservative institutions in the energy field moving in that direction. At ARENA, we have been generating estimate of renewable energy jobs for a decade now, and we, together with that, also forecasts for the energy transition. So basically, translating the technology pathways from into socioeconomic variables such as jobs, GDP, welfare, etc. So obviously, we're not looking only at numbers, but also the policies that go with it, beyond just deployment policies, the context in which the renewables are being deployed, the quality of jobs, the diversity within the labor market, etc. So to just set the scene for you today, I will share some of our latest findings and some insights and recommendations that we have in the forthcoming Just Transition brief, which is done by the Coalition for Action. Our latest report, great, it's on, okay. Our greatest report indicates that the number of jobs is on an upward trend, and this has been the case since 2012 when we started this series. So we were about 7.3 million at the time, we're 12.7 million in 2021. And interestingly enough, even during COVID in 2021, in 1 year we had an increase of renewable energy jobs of 700,000. Now, if you see on the slide, the technology that takes the lead is solar PV with close to 4.3 million jobs, which is about a third of the workforce, and it's followed by liquid biofuels, hydro, and wind. The energy industry in general continues to employ many more men than women. Renewables, it does much better than conventional energy, but still there's a long way to go to get parity. Again, IRENA was the first to do a global survey on women in renewable energy. That's the famous 32% that everybody uses. We then tried to look at technology, what it means. We were quite disappointed with the numbers in wind, which was about 21%, but in PV, which is the latest survey that we did, we have 40% of women, which is about double of the wind industry and almost double from the oil and gas industry. So I take this opportunity to invite you all to attend the special event on gender right after this session, where we will present the main findings, and it's going to be followed with a nice reception where we'll have some drinks and food and can continue the discussion. Now, if we go back to jobs, you will see on the slide that the geographical distribution is quite concentrated. So you have a handful of countries dominating the renewable energy landscape in terms of job, and that's really reflecting their strength in installation of generation capacity, but also in manufacturing of equipment, engineering and related services, and that's why they're reaping a majority of jobs. So close to two-thirds of all jobs are in Asia. China alone accounts for 42% of the global total, followed by the EU, Brazil, the US, and India. Now, you know, the good news is that we are seeing that renewable energy jobs are being generated increasingly in other geographies, as some of the components of production is shifting to different regions. Southeast Asian countries, for example, are a major PV manufacturing hub and biofuels producer. Mexico has become a leading supplier of wind turbine blades in the Western Hemisphere. Now, in Africa, the role is still limited, for example, but there are growing job opportunities in decentralized renewables linked to local commerce, agriculture, other economic activities, but also in the centralized space. Now, as I told you, we also do forecasts based on our 1.5 compliant energy pathway, and we have estimated that with adequate policy support, of course, and mobilization of large front-loaded investment, we can have about 38 million jobs by 2030, with even more jobs created in other transition-related sectors, energy efficiency, etc. But for this to materialize, we will need a really comprehensive, holistic policy framework to enable countries and people to take advantage of the emerging opportunities and to overcome the structural dependencies related to commodity dependency, technology dependency, trade dependency, as illustrated in on the slide here by ARENA's global policy framework that needs to be taken into consideration when deploying renewables and trying to maximize benefit out of that. And it follows in some way some of the guidelines of a just transition that were negotiated in 2015 by representatives of government, the private sector, and labor unions by ILO. That also includes a comprehensive package of many different kinds of policies that are required: macroeconomic policies, fiscal policies, training for workers, social protection, social dialogue, etc. So ARENA's work on the socioeconomic impacts of renewable energy really places people at the core of the energy transition, and this is also reflected in the Coalition for Action network, which obviously hosts this event today. So in ARENA's coalition, we have different working groups, and one of them is the Sustainable Energy Jobs Working Group that is chaired by the International Labour Organization and provides a platform to discuss and analyze and share best practices on the inclusive energy transition. Last year, the coalition members convened a series of webinars exploring trade union and employers' perspective on a just transition. And we also carried out interviews with trade union representatives to gather their insights and concerns. So I'm just going to provide a snapshot of some of the findings and recommendations that will be published later this year in a policy brief entitled "Finding Common Ground for a Just Energy Transition." So basically, a just energy transition, let's say that it broadly means that benefits are shared widely and equitably, and that burdens of adjustment are minimized. But that's true within countries, but it's also true between countries and regions. And as you know, many developing countries, as I just mentioned, still face commodity, technology, and trade dependencies and labor market imbalances. So one of the challenges is to create decent jobs in a low-carbon economy while protecting workers moving out of fossil fuel industries. Obviously, economic diversification is key, building on existing infrastructures, skills, and local strengths, and efforts should be aimed at skills development, including current and future workers, young women and men. So if the transition is to gain the full support of the labor movement, new jobs must be decent jobs. The perspective of labor trade unions that we spoke to is that individuals deserve a workplace that provides a fair income, security, development opportunities, social protection, etc. So workers must be involved in the decisions that affect their livelihoods. And just to highlight three elements for more inclusive planning. One is that we need clear processes for social dialogue at all stages, leading to some binding agreements. The second is the ownership of the process. Workers must be given the opportunity to make informed decisions and influence decisions. And finally, we need more transparencies, questions concerning the type and location of jobs, training and safety nets, etc., must be open to debate with the workers involved. So to conclude, some key takeaways for this presentation. First, more effort is required to build a stronger consensus with and within the labor movement that can better align the climate agenda and the interests of workers. Provisions for a just transition need to be integrated into climate, but also trade and industrial policy. That's why we illustrated the ARENA global holistic approach and a sort of more consistent implementation of ILO just transition guidelines. Embedded in this policy framework that we propose by ARENA, but that means also that we need to question some of the existing international rules in our economy and not shy away from going to the core of the questions. Obviously, another point is the opportunities that should be identified for local value creations, jobs, and more equitable sharing of benefits, and a deeper understanding of socioeconomic impacts that is needed in energy access areas. Obviously, as I mentioned, we need to focus also on the quality of jobs, and then on international collaboration across institutions, cross-sectoral cooperation that can help smooth the energy transition if redefined at a level playing field between the global north and the global south. Finally, a just transition is impossible without significant funding. Currently, it's insufficient to meet all the needs just described. In the times of uncertainty and economic insecurity, immediate needs might take priority, but we have seen that COVID-19, the financial crisis, different wars, can mobilize funds. So we hope that funds can be mobilized for the greater public good. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts, insights, and experience during this discussion. And back to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rubia. That's perfect timing. This means we have about 90 minutes for the debate, and we have a really good turnout, which I'm not surprised about. It has evolved over the last 5 years. What was a public-private discussion to bring in the private sector has now widened the tent, if you will, right, in the spirit of the Middle East, to include the youth and labor unions. So because of that, because we've widened the stage or the tent, if you will, to get all the voices in, it's very important to keep your interventions to 3 minutes. We can have a debate thereafter and actually pick up on each other's comments, but we have at least 20 people to get through that have expressed an interest. So if you can't keep to 3 minutes, I do need to intervene with you, not in the interest of being rude, but in the interest of making sure all the voices are heard around the table, which I think is very important. Just to set the framework, depending on what you're going to say here in the first round, we have kind of 6 central questions to address in our 90 minutes together. I'm going to feed in 3 now, right? 3. And we'll try to stick to that theme in the first part of this, say the first 45 minutes. And then I'll introduce the second theme of questions. I think it's probably the most orderly way of doing so. If you have other thoughts, bring them to the table, but these are kind of the framework questions for us to undertake here. What do just energy transitions mean in practice? I said that in my opening comment. The enabling policies to do it, the key challenges that stand in the way. What tools, as the second question, and processes can facilitate a social dialogue? What is the role of labor rights and collective bargaining, which is often overlooked in the transition, but it cannot be. I think President Biden's one that has put that kind of front and center to make sure the just transition includes well-paying jobs. What critical skills are needed to drive the energy transition forward, and how do we bridge the gap between existing and required skills? I've actually covered this in the field where you had the oil and gas companies wanting to make the transition, and they have all that engineering prowess, but it doesn't necessarily transfer over to the renewable space. It's kind of a different field, so it's not very simple, as we found out. I thought your figure that you put up there was extraordinary, 12.7 million jobs, which is impressive, but just under half of those came from the 2 giant emerging markets of the world, being China and India, so we have to get the dispersity also into the developed world as well. I can't see all the placards here, but I'm going to take the liberties of inviting Ms. Dite Jorgensen, the Director General DG Energy for the European Commission, if you can, to start for us, and I appreciate you being ready. These microphones, from my past experience, are extremely directional, so you have to be right in front of them. So I know there's not enough microphones to go around, but when you're ready to speak, make sure they are in front so everybody can hear you. And if I've missed anybody that wants to talk, just tilt your sign up and I'll make sure I see it. I also have people feeding me this in my ears and on WhatsApp, so I'll try not to miss anybody. We're pretty prepared for this. Please, thanks.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to participate in this session this afternoon. For the European Union, the just transition is an integral part of our green transition, integral part of our Green Deal, and therefore also a central part in how we are addressing the current energy crisis that we are facing globally. The global energy crisis is essentially a result of supply lagging behind demand. That has been reinforced, has been further triggered, further strengthened by the fact that Russia unilaterally has weaponized gas, has weaponized energy, and taken energy out of the global market, linked also to its unilateral war in Ukraine. Our response to that, Repower EU, aims to, as quickly as possible, become more resilient in the European Union, more energy independent in the European Union, and to replace the energy that has been lost from the global market. We do that, first of all, by being more energy efficient, by reducing our consumption. We do it by scaling up and accelerating renewable energy in our system. And we do that by replacing those supplies with supplies from reliable partners across the world with whom we have been working intensively over this past year. Now, the just transition is critical to achieving the energy transition. It is critical to achieving climate neutrality in 2050. And it is therefore also critical to how we address the energy crisis that we are currently facing, all of us, and that has a significant impact in Europe. This year, 2023, is also the European Year of Skills. And so these agendas fit together because we are going to need to improve our skill set. We're going to need to build the skills and the labor markets that can respond to the crisis that we are facing, the dual climate crisis and energy crisis that is currently there. We have significant experience within the European Union about just transition. How do we best help the regions that are dependent on fossil fuels, dependent on fossil industries? How do we help these regions adapt to and become leaders in the climate work, in the renewable energy work, and in the green transition work? A lot of what we have been doing within the European Union to build these skills, to build this labor market, to ensure that it links into social dialogue, that it links into decent work and the ongoing work of the International Labour Organization. We also do that with our global partners as part of the Just Energy Transition partnerships, for example, with South Africa, with Indonesia, where those cooperative processes can further help and emulate what we have experienced and what we have benefited from within the European Union. So we look forward to working further with global partners to make that happen and to make that transition, a just transition as well, again, addressing the climate crisis and the energy crisis with the same instruments, renewable energy, building the skills to achieve that, energy efficiency, and lowering our consumption globally. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much. It was very super clear. I'm glad you brought up the labor unions, which we're going to call upon as well, Director General. Who would ever thought you would have a challenge like you had in the last 18 months, right? So we didn't want to park the energy transition, but it was the mother of all challenges. And then it also accelerated the planning for the transition as well, I think, because the over-reliance we've had on hydrocarbons in Europe have been quite challenging itself. But it's nice to see also the European Union responding with the states in such an aggressive way. I think many didn't think that was going to happen, and it certainly did. If I may, I'd like to go to Belize and bring in the Honorable Michel Sherbat, who's the minister. You know kind of the framework for what we talked about. We have your interventions to 3 minutes. I didn't know what you wanted to focus on in that category of 3. The DG kind of covered all 3 of them, but the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first, apologies as the Minister Sherbat could not make it due to the cancellation of flights in the U.S. I'm Ryan, the Director of Energy.
But nice to have you. But
Sure.
he fell into the trap of that was chaos. I mean, luckily I'm not living in the States anymore because that was chaos. Thank you very much for the clarity.
But I did wanted to somewhat touch on what the just energy transitions means in practice. In practice, what we need to look at is not just transitioning from one energy carrier to another, and not. I'm thinking about energy security as well, such as in SIDS countries, we cannot just go from replacing our importation and our dependency on fossil fuels to that of another dependency of another energy carrier, even though if it is biofuels and being it environmentally friendly. We need to increase our energy security. within the region. And also talking about just energy transitions, within the six countries, specifically within Central America as well, we are still looking at achieving access to modern energy carriers. And any types of policies that we put in place, we must keep in mind what these effects have on these people as well. Transitioning does incur some cost, but these costs might be minimal to the average consumer within the country. But those that are greatly affected are the ones that sometimes cannot pay for this transition. So the burden must be carried by the other citizens as well. It's not just, I think it's a duty for all citizens to work together to bring upon that transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the intervention and the clarity. I'm sorry to see the minister couldn't make it, but that matter is just clearing up. I think I'd love to get the labor union community involved here, and I hope I have the pronunciation right. Mr. Atley Hoy, General Secretary of Industrial All, the global union. Did you want to obviously address the labor issues in terms of pay and pay structures and agreements in this transition, which is very vital? Please.
Well, thank you very much. I could make it very easy on myself and say that if everybody listened very carefully to Director Faruqi and what she said, we would have the solution. But unfortunately, experience tells me that most people haven't listened to the director, which is why I would need to repeat some of the things and maybe evolve on some of it. But I think, first of all, we have to recognize that trade unions in themselves are not respected in many places. So if you want to talk to trade unions, you need to enable trade unions to exist in your countries. And more countries are making it more difficult to become a trade unionist, to engage in collective bargaining, and to be part of society in that matter. So that's the first thing. Countries have to respect the right to organize and the right to bargain collectively, which is not the case in many countries. That is the only way to get forward on this. We know that many societies will change dramatically in the transition that is coming. And if a transition is going to be real and just, it has to involve the unions and their members. And again, you can't do that if you don't respect the rights of unions to exist. I think I'll stop there, and then I hope you'll let me in at a later point.
Sure, I'd love to. I know President Biden, if you don't mind, Atley, to jump in, said this at the very beginning. He was hoping for a bigger package. We're going to hear from the United States thereafter. But it was a signal that was important, I think, right? How do you think that was received in other parts of the world, the developed in particular, and the developing? Just if you can weigh in on that.
Yeah, well, of course, President Biden's and his Labor Secretary's statements are very welcome in the trade union world. I mean, it's the most progressive American administration we've had since Roosevelt, probably. And it's a very strong signal to the rest of the world that we need to include unions. I mean, he's very open about the fact that society needs to engage in unions, that everybody has to have this right and make it easier. You know, as a matter of fact, the South states of the US is probably the most difficult place to be organized in the world. That is quite a shocking news for many, but it's a fact. And I hope that Biden's words and his Labor Secretary's words will make it easier in the South states, but also in the rest of the world.
But thank you very much. It's interesting because that's where most of the manufacturing facilities have been going for the last 15 or 20 years. Actually, I was on site a number of those. I wanted to call into the private sector and have them have a voice in this debate. Ms. Welleberger Hemsenberger, the Chief Executive Officer of Solar Power Europe. The floor is yours. Before you start, if I may, I was just going to say, I'm going to get to everybody in this front row, but those in the other two circles, just tilt your sign and put it upright, and not just myself, the front table and others are keeping an eye to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. Please, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. I would like to start by saying that transitioning to renewables is inherently transitioning to a more just energy system. I think this is the basis we have to start with when talking about just transition, because what we're looking at is democratizing the energy system. We're looking into moving from a centralized energy system which was in the hands of few to a decentralized energy system where there's many players, diverse players, and where also energy citizens are playing a major role. We are also looking into at a system where access to energy will be secured, which is very important in many parts of the world. And we're looking at a system where everyone can afford to have energy. Renewables today are the cheapest energy sources, solar, wind, and the costs are continuing to decrease. So people can afford bills, and in times of crisis as the one we are living today, this is becoming very obvious. People need to be able to come over winter times when it's very cold in parts of the world, and it has to be, and people need to afford to pay energy, and companies need to afford to pay energy and to remain competitive. So all of that to start with. Now, in the solar sector, we are looking at a massive growth. We've seen some of the figures which, when it comes to solar growth, just to give you some more. So we do believe that the world will see a global 1 terawatt solar market by 2030, and annual installations of 1 terawatt and more as of 2030. We have been running global market outlooks and European market outlooks for quite some time, and have always been surprised ourselves that the market developments are going much faster than what has been forecasted. Now, why I'm mentioning this is because this is coming along with some great job opportunities. We do also some job reports, and the figures are very similar to the ones that Rabia just presented. In Europe, today we have 470,000 jobs. By 2030, we will have 1 million jobs, at least. Even we could even have 1.5 million, depending on the growth path. So these are green jobs. These are highly skilled jobs, and these are above all local jobs. And I think I want to highlight these local jobs because it's opportunities and it's supporting just transition everywhere, because we will see these deployments everywhere. And in particular also in regions which might find it hard to transition, like for example coal regions, which obviously need to look into new business models, but where the initiative that has been taken, for example, by the European Commission on coal regions in transition is very important, and is giving new opportunities to the people who have in the past been working in the coal sector. And the last point I want to make is that obviously I agree very much that new jobs in the green industry have to be decent jobs. And I do think this is one of the reasons why, and I'm very happy to see these figures, that today more than 40% of women are working in the solar sector. And one of the reasons, because I'm always asked why is that? One of the reasons is that it is decent jobs and many different jobs that the solar sector is providing, from medium to highly skilled, from installer jobs to administrative jobs, HR jobs, project management, engineering. So I think this is also something which adds to a just transition and which is very important in this respect. Looking forward to the further discussion.
Good. Just a very quick follow-up. It was very clear what you had to say, but the training versus STEM university education, is the training coming fast enough, do you think, to make that transition? Are we equipped in Europe to do the training?
I do think that a lot of emphasis has to be put into making more trainings available, absolutely, in STEM jobs, and to also raise awareness about the opportunities, because it's not just about the trainings being available, but also putting all of that into context. We've just recently launched a job platform where we're putting together the actors of the sector, training institutes, and job seekers, because this is incredibly important to show what kind of skills need to be provided, but also put people in contact with training institutes and have more trainings available, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's the awareness. Just to manage expectations here, I wanted to call on Peter Wenzel, but I indicated to Mr. Yumkela, the Member of Parliament from Sierra Leone, to go next, and then I'll come to you thereafter, right? I'm trying to also do very much developing and to make sure these voices are very balanced. If you don't mind, Kande, please.
Okay. Rabia, I noticed that your projection for the rest of Africa, outside of North Africa and Southern Africa, was still less than 1 million jobs. So the prospects for the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa do not look good. For us, the issue still is economic diversification, structural change in our economies to move into industrialization. That's the key. That's our challenge with the population boom we're expecting, 2.3 billion Africans by 2050. So we have to think, as Valerie, one of the CEOs, said this morning in the hydrogen discussion, we need to think about gigawatt scale expansions if we're looking at Africa. So economic diversification, which means we still need to look at jobs at utility scale integration of renewables and grid expansions. We need this badly. We need grid expansion. We need grid flexibility to be able to industrialize. So again, to look at that value chain and look at the skills we're going to need. Therefore, here, vocational technical education will be crucial. But again, the challenges are different from country to country. And here, we're looking at the European Union in 2 dimensions. We're asking ourselves, with the JETP program for South Africa, how fast are we moving in its implementation? You know, our hopes were raised in Glasgow. This is the new model, $8 billion to deal with some of the socioeconomic transition South Africa has to face. Some of their regions are highly dependent on coal for jobs. How is that going now? There is a plan to do JETP for Nigeria, $4 billion. How is that, when is that going to be formulated? Is the implementation moving? Is the design moving? Is the private sector involved? Are the local banks strong enough to encourage that public-private partnership we want to see? So the financial depth of local financial institutions will be crucial. Finally, again, for most of Sub-Saharan Africa, it's that integration of renewables and the productive sector, agriculture, food security. And of course, the recent crisis with Ukraine has highlighted how much food price inflation in most African countries is between 25 to 35%. So when I see Europeans and Americans worried about 8% inflation, I say, come to my neighborhood and see what 35%, 60% is like for food price inflation. Finally, we have this continuing dialogue with Europe on gas. Our transition must include gas. 30% of the new discoveries in the last 15 years were in Africa. So our transition to renewables in 2050 has to have a pathway with gas, the skills required, the investment packaging, the structuring of the deals, all of these become relevant. So we hope with our friends in Europe that our dialogue will be in the context of diversification, industrialization, jobs, given the demographic challenges we're going to see by 2050.
Okay, thanks very much, Candy. Very quick, if I may follow up. I remember when President van der Leyen went to Senegal, and she said that the institutions don't want to lend money to any more hydrocarbons in Africa. And then we had the crisis in Ukraine, and then there was a rethink of that policy. I think it's fair to say I've met the Senegalese energy minister, and Mozambique and Tanzania also have had phenomenal discoveries. So even in Pierre wants to address it, or our Director General from the European Union as well. But does that mean a transition of 30 years in your mind for Africa to have access to natural gas? Because it's a key question. And, you know, is that blue hydrogen eventually where it gets cleaned up at a faster pace? Please.
Well, I have facilitated several discussions in Brussels and also at COP27 now on this very question. In Europe, they call it pragmatism for energy security. So I guess we Africans also have a right to that kind of pragmatism, that we have this resource, and we want to partner with Europe not only for the natural gas resources, but green hydrogen. And I know EU has some partnerships with Namibia, with Mauritania, and a number of North African countries. So indeed, in the green hydrogen space, Kenya, Namibia, we can see that leapfrog. Kenya through geothermal. We can begin to produce that green hydrogen for Europe, but also the ammonia we need for fertilizers. It's crucial. Food production requires fertilizers, and we can be in that space, so creating more jobs and value addition.
Good. Dita, we're short on time. Do you want to weigh in quickly? And I'm going to call on Per. Please go ahead first on that topic.
Thank you, and thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you for raising these important issues. Now, first of all, on the Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa, this is a critical one, and I think the issues you have flagged, you have raised in terms of what is the local engagement, the local ability, both in terms of local industry, in terms of local financial sector. These are indeed critical questions for the just transition and questions that we look forward to helping to solve, working with you on these issues together. As regards the relation between the need for natural gas in the transition and managing the crisis, I think we can all agree here that a critical point in addressing the crisis is to accelerate and scale up renewables as quickly as possible. That is where the real answer is. But as you have also said, natural gas is part of the energy transition. We have natural gas as an important part of our energy system in Europe, and that's going to remain part of that energy system. The more we can lower our demand for natural gas, the more we can also help improve the overall balance in the global markets for natural gas and molecules. So these things go together. What we do in Europe will have an impact on others, and we're fully aware of that, which is a reason that we are reducing our demand, reducing our consumption through energy efficiency and energy savings, and a reason that we are accelerating the renewable build-out in Europe. That has a relevance for the global markets as well. So I think that pragmatism, which has to be part of it, security is central to all of us, that pragmatism has to be pragmatic in a way that aligns with our longer-term climate objectives, that aligns with our 2050 targets. So what we try to make sure in the European Union is that we don't overinvest in technology or in infrastructure that served the past, but that will not serve the future. And that's where green hydrogen comes in terms of ensuring that we can replace some of the fossil molecules with green molecules through renewable energy, either renewable energy, renewable electricity generated in the European Union, or green molecules that we import from partners through investments with partners, for example, in South Africa and in other countries in the African continent. So we look forward to continuing that work, and I think we share that vision, that direction, including in how can we work together in modernizing the energy sector and making it an energy sector for this century based primarily on renewables, but with gas being part of the transition over the coming decades. Thank you very
good.
much.
A key question, maybe we can get into it later in the debate. I thank you for jumping in. Is just whether the lending institutions, you brought up the fortification of the banks in Africa, if they're in a position to lend or not, and do they get support from the development banks at the same time, which are kind of instructed not to go into this space, right? We heard what the World Bank, for example, said 3 years ago, no new hydrocarbons. That makes it difficult for the African voice. Even Latin America is in the same position. Pierre Wenzel, thank you very much. Parliamentary State Secretary for Germany. I appreciate your patience. The floor is yours. Thanks. It's worth having the debate, though, I have to say. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion. And I would first say that just transition affects workers as well as many people's livelihood and their environment, and this includes all topics like intergenerational justice, gender equality, and empowering marginalized people. And second, this means that phasing out fossil fuels or expanding renewables will only work if society has an active and shaping role in the process. And there we see a lot of very interesting developments. For example, to reach energy access and to fight energy poverty, we have a very new possibility with renewables. We have still 600 to 800 million people on the world which don't have access to electricity. And now we can go even to very remote islands or very remote villages which never had a grid, and now have the possibility to reach energy access. And we have a very cheap source. Just when we realized what happens after the aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine, we see also very high prices, not only in Europe, but all over the world. And that was a problem for a lot of people who had to save their income in the last year and in this year also. And so everybody who has the possibility to use, for example, his own renewables on the roof or on the countryside or wherever, have a cheap source for substitute press the prices down. And so it's very important to have not only consumers of electricity, but also to have people who produce electricity. And we have a new situation. We have prosumers. People consume and people produce at the same time. And that's also interesting because, for example, in the last summer in Europe, it was cheaper to use green ammonia because of the high gas prices. It was cheaper to use green hydrogen than to use blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen. But we don't have yet the production capacities we knew. So we must work very strong on the capacity, on the capacities. And when we see the IRENA, what IRENA counts all over the world, what are the new capacities for production of energy? So we see 50% solar, 25% wind, very few nuclear, and very few fossils. That is the new path because of the prices, because the renewables are the cheapest source and therefore also very important for the social situation of the people all over the world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We also had the shock this summer of the low water levels in France, creating a huge challenge that we were not expecting in the nuclear sector, which is kind of the reawakening of our new realities. Johnny Chiametta is the CEO of the Global Solar Council. The floor is yours, and I'm going to just bring in the other two private sectors right afterwards. We haven't heard a lot from that space. Johnny, please.
Thank you for the floor. And indeed, talking about just transition is very important to put a time of this transition, and because a transition cannot be forever. And we need very much an exit strategy from fossil fuel, because today, not tomorrow, the renewables, solar, and all the other renewables can really secure the energy. So we can have security of energy through solar and the other renewables. We can have a lot of potential reducing the emission, supporting other sectors like the mobility. We need to recognize that solar energy, as also other renewables, talking about solar energy, is not a low cost, but in most countries the cheapest. If I think about Africa, anyway, with all the sun, is really the cheapest. And so why to still have incentives to fossil fuels? There's a lot of mechanisms around that in reality are incentives to fossil fuel, why we can invest in new technology, in the technology which is cheap. There are a lot of barriers nowadays to access. We need solar PV to have equal access to the markets. And we need, of course, to utilize solar to alleviate poverty, to have to encourage off-grid systems, to give some guarantees. We need to build capabilities, that was said. Just transition, of course, is very important that we invest a lot in training capabilities, and of course to recognize solar codes and standards, and to simplify, of course, to utilize standard contracts and so on. But there is another very important bottleneck, which is the authorization procedure. We need really to simplify that. And it was mentioned before that really people nowadays can make the difference. Global Solar Council is talking to people this year, last year. We did a campaign, global campaign in several languages, in English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Chinese, Arabic, Ukraine, explain people what benefits bring solar to individuals, to the grid, to the society, to the planet. And these blogs can be utilized by all of you, all countries, and we encourage you to disseminate. Not only that, we did a survey on 12 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, France, Malaysia, Mexico, Philippines, South Africa, Spain, Ukraine, expecting what is the potential of distributed PV and also what are the barriers, etc. Anyway, we end up to just a few numbers. There are many countries where solar distributed PV, so the residential PV count 25% of the market. And also, of course, there are, we need to also in this case really simplify the authorization procedures. It's not acceptable that a family that want to put a PV roof in the need to wait 6 months or more, or even in industry where there is even not environmental restriction. Well, there are a number of recommendations that we will make available at Global Solar Council, but there is no time anymore to wait. We need an exit strategy now because there is really a huge need, and the war and demonstrate that really we cannot depend on geopolitical issues, but we need to create, there are no wars if people can be independent and self-consume the energy. Thank you.
Good. I think there's a lack at the consumer level, which often the language within even the COP community doesn't relate to the consumer, and I think the consumer education of how to buy solar and install is lacking, right? It's come a long ways in 5 years, but still it's not that accessible, I don't think, as a flip of a switch. Am I saying it correctly, GWEC? Okay, perfect. If you can introduce yourself, because I don't have you on my list, and I'm going to come to you. You can, if I haven't called on you, leave that up so I don't miss you. I'll come to Aref next, please.
First of all, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Irina, for this invitation. I'm Ben Backwell from the Global Wind Energy Council. We represent the industry worldwide. I'm going to make a few brief points around just transition in a fairly direct way. First of all, the wind energy sector is going to go into a period of very dramatic growth and will end up probably being the largest producer of electricity globally by 2050 due to the kind of high capacity factors of wind, and that's going to create millions of industrial jobs. Now, when I look at just transition, one of the things that I think is a real challenge and a barrier is that tendering and public procurement has always been based till now mainly around price criteria. And that basically means around squeezing as much value as possible from the renewables supply chain and really just trying to cheapen the cost of energy. And that's obviously been very, very successful in terms of making renewables more competitive than oil and gas. It's taken us to where we are. But I think within the context of the just transition, we need to look at the wider context and the wider benefits that this creates, right? So are tendering and public procurement processes taking into account good jobs? Are they taking into account economic benefits locally? Are they taking into account gender and gender parity and gender diversity? Or are we just having treasury departments trying to create the cheapest possible price of energy? Because it's not always the same thing. And I think one of the things around the JETPs and the dialogue that we've been involved in with governments and with financiers is how do we build in these non-economic criteria into public procurement processes. We know that even with higher costs in renewables due to inflation, higher raw material costs, we're still way, way, way more competitive than oil and gas. I mean, it's an order of magnitude at the moment because of high gas prices. So there's no reason why we need to continue driving down the price of renewables. We're already cheaper than anybody else. What we need to look at now is what's the economic benefit? How do we get social buy-in? How do we make sure that we're treating people well? How do we make sure that we are unionized and that we are having the highest possible standards of labor? You know, those are the things we should be looking at now. And unfortunately, many, many countries are still just looking at, you know, how extremely low and cheap can we make wind and solar? And I think that's the wrong approach. The second point, and I will be very brief, is around localization, because you know, we see very, very positive things now, like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which is really an incentive-based approach to ensuring that we get localization, that we get investment in things like green hydrogen, in cement, in steel, in supply chain. And then immediately we get other interests, blocks, countries going to a kind of WTO framework, which again is basically, for me, based in a kind of a bit of an old world approach, which is, you know, everybody's got to, nobody can be incentivizing or nobody can be trying to get localization. And I think it's wrong. I mean, I think we would like to see other countries and regions reproducing and emulating what the US has done with the IRA, because we think it's an incredibly positive thing. And we used to go around at GWEC saying we don't want local content requirements. It's impossible. Everywhere we go, particularly around offshore wind, everybody says, the first thing they ask is how many factories are going to get, how many blade factories, how many jobs. And I think it's completely justified. I think we need to address that part of localization. And then just one final point, and this is the final one. I saw Rabia presenting those rather disappointing statistics around gender parity in the wind industry. And this is something that Rabia and I have had many, many conversations around. We worked with Irina on the production of the first report around gender in work statistics. At GWEC, one of the first things I did, along with my policy director, Joyce Lee, when I took over, was establish the Women in Wind initiative, and we've been pushing very, very hard in our industry to fast-track women through companies and through the system in wind energy. We're actually about to move into a kind of phase 2 Women in Wind, which is going to be about setting standards. It's also going to be, to some extent, naming and shaming and setting standards to companies and targets for companies, and producing reports where we have some transparency into different regions, countries, and targets. So please, everyone in this room, I just ask really for your patience. Certainly, at the representative organisation, this is front and centre of everything we're doing, and we're putting this forward in every forum that we can, and we will push very, very hard over the next few years to make sure that we're getting on the right track with gender diversity. So thank you, John, and thank you, everyone.
It was an excellent point you raised, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Assistant Secretary if you can address that as well, because I know the local content issue is a big one. I've seen the moaning, in different corners of the world. So how do you strike the balance of living by the global standards of the WTO and then also dealing with local content? So just forewarning in terms of the debate, if you can bring that in. Thank you for your patience. That is Rainer Hinrichs Baldiz, Vice President of EREF, please. And then I'm going to go to the United States on that with Isabel, and then I'm going to go to the youth, and then to Panama, just for a flow. And keep your signs up, because my memory goes up every once in a while at my age, so please, thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. And actually, the European renewable energies. Closer? Yeah.
We can hear you. Just be you have to be really direct with those mics.
I try.
Thank you.
Normally I'm loud enough, but I try. So the European Renewable Energy Federation is an association working in the field of all renewables, all sectors, all technologies. So this is not technology specific, what I'm going to say. And this is for the energy transformation as a whole. We heard from several speakers that we need millions of new jobs. We already have millions of jobs, and we need them in many more places than we have so far. We saw from the statistics, it's really focused in a few countries. And to make this happen, we certainly need many things, but I have only 3 minutes, so I'll try to focus on 2 things. One is we need to be aware that the jobs in renewable energy, like renewable energy as such as a technology, is more decentralized, more distributed, meaning you need jobs in many different places. And jobs is not only in manufacturing, that's in installing, in infrastructure, in maintenance, in technology, in digitization, etc., etc. So I think this acknowledgement that these jobs are different at different places, but still they need quite good skilling and reskilling. So part of the solution certainly is private-public cooperation between existing energy companies, energy producers, energy providers, startups, energy communities, citizens, prosumers was mentioned. So I think all these people need to work together, and let's not forget the trade unions definitely, who have a role to play to increase acceptance for the transformation with those workers who have jobs to lose in the old energy system, and who definitely can be reskilled for the new jobs, but who have to be reskilled because it's not the same jobs. So I think, and to make this happen, I think 2 things are important. One is you need to set up structures and as distributed as possible and as close to where things happen as possible, where something like round tables, people sitting together and trying to organize the transformation. I think that the basis is policymakers, but private sector as well, decision makers need to be aware the transformation will happen. The transformation can happen, and it's reasonable and it's affordable. But for this, of course, you need to have people at the table. You need to discuss how to best achieve this. One caveat, because I heard something about pragmatism. Pragmatism in this context cannot mean, should not mean, let's continue for some more years because it's easier to do what we always did. The transformation will happen, and the clearer the decision and policy incentives where possible to push them in one direction, the easier it's for the private sector to invest, and the easier it is for the vocational training, for reskilling, to do this in a focused way. So I think this kind of focus, policy-wise, and of course, where needed, financial support, policy support from governments, from cities, from private sector, where this is possible.
Okay.
So I think this is the main point, and if we manage to do this, then we will definitely have many more jobs, and we will have them in nearly all parts of the world, and I think this is where we have to go.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting point you make, because I just came from Saudi Arabia. It was a mining conference, but there was a great deal of conversation about hydrogen. So I have to congratulate this community, because the thing that was said at least 5 or 6 times was the subsidies that were provided to solar and then wind actually gave it a head start, but it needs a 10-year window. And there's a lot of discussion, why are we not doing the same thing with green hydrogen, right, to accelerate the transition. So just from a policy apparatus, the feedback was, if you do get it right and you don't rush out of it, that it does support. So I'd like to have others weigh in. This is such a fantastic group, I don't even have to give this indicative next 3 questions, because everybody's coming on with very good input. Isabel Manila, DAS at Energy, is which department are you working in?
Department of Energy.
Excellent. Yeah, please.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And firstly, thank you very much to Irina for this excellent assembly. I hope that all of you have gotten some sleep. Rabia, thank you for the excellent presentation, for setting the table for us for this discussion. I'm so pleased to be around with all of you. I think our children and our grandchildren are happy that we're here talking to each other, and it's an excellent debate. Also, thank you for the recognition of the Biden administration's focus on unions, and as a former union contract negotiator a couple of jobs ago, I think that means a lot to me, and means a lot to me to have joined this administration last year and supporting that really strong position. So much to say here. I'm going to try to keep to my 3 minutes, and I'm going to time myself just to make sure here. But just to start, in terms of the way that this administration in the United States approaches the just transition, we're committed to tackling both the climate crisis and ensuring that no one gets left behind. Obviously, that's why we're all sitting here. And we're really focusing on the tremendous global economic opportunity to build diverse and resilient economies where people can live safe, sustainable, and prosperous lives. So again, the tone and the tenor of this conversation is, music to my ears, certainly. And just to say, we're happy with where we're going, but there's still a lot to go. We've doubled our renewable energy in the U.S. from 10% in 2010 to 20% in 2020. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and we're committed to accelerating the clean energy transition that uplifts communities and workers. I wanted to highlight just a few areas and would encourage Irina to continue to convene these spaces where we can share lessons about how we're doing in our domestic context. I think we're still learning. I think we really can benefit from having continued debate on how we're doing. So clearly, I agree with a lot of what's been said. The just transitions is not only about supplying jobs, but also about high-quality jobs supported by strong labor unions that safeguard worker protections. Safeguard worker protections. We can't say that enough. And that spans a variety of industries. And just wanted to touch on a point that was made earlier as well on workforce training. When we talk about it, it's essential that this training is targeted to actual investments in jobs that exist today, not just the jobs we think will be there tomorrow. And the best way to do that is through meaningful industry and worker partnerships where industry brings to the table a clear sense of the opportunities and needed skills, while workers, organized labor and workforce training organizations bring a clear sense of existing training structures that can be leveraged to meet those needs. One highlight that I don't have time to get into, but one to flag is that We have a battery workforce initiative where the Department of Energy, in coordination with our Department of Labor and the AFL-CIO, launched a national workforce development strategy that's focused on lithium battery manufacturing. As part of a $5 billion investment, we support pilot training programs in energy and automotive communities to bring together manufacturing companies, organized labor, and training providers to lay the foundation for the development of a broad national workforce strategy. So again, happy to share learnings on that as well with others making similar investments. So many other things to flag that I'm going to skip. I do want to
need you to wrap in 90 seconds. So
sure,
please,
sure.
thanks.
So a couple of initiatives with much appreciation to our co-chair, South Africa, and the hard work of IRENA staff. We've learned a lot about what the just transition means through the JIET collaborative framework and today's event, so I just wanted to flag that. It's an important opportunity for us. We also co-lead the Clean Energy Ministerial Empowering People Initiative with Canada and the European Commission, and recently partnered with the IEA to produce a Global Clean Energy Action Forum case study analysis on reskilling, and we continue to push that effort forward. There's other work I could flag. We also have quite a bit of work on coal and power plant communities and economic revitalization and billions in support to those communities. I won't go, it sounds like I don't have enough time to get into those as well. But I do want to flag the question that was raised, and I know and many have talked about our tax incentive in our new legislation. As most folks know, Biden administration had a lot of catch up to do. We spent the first few years of this new administration getting back to where the U.S. needs to be and trying to go further. And this piece of legislation, and we have 3 pieces of legislation, our bipartisan infrastructure law, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act. These were central components to our plan and our domestic plan to really put our national development commitment, our climate commitment, in our sights. And so we feel that we've made some good progress there. And certainly, I'll talk about the concerns on the IRA in just a moment, but I do want to flag there's a number of worker protection incentives that I just want to flag. I won't get too much into it, but would appreciate if folks want to talk about that later, happy to discuss. But the expanded tax credits for energy efficient commercial buildings, homes, and EV charging infrastructure include bonus credits for businesses that pay prevailing wages and hire registered apprentices. Companies that promise to pay prevailing wages but don't follow through are penalized, and workers who are owed prevailing wages will receive the difference plus interest. Additionally, clean energy tax credits are increased by 10% if the clean energy projects are established in communities that have previously relied upon the extraction, processing, transport, or storage of coal, oil, natural gas as a significant source of employment. So we're really focusing on energy communities and focusing on energy justice as part of our tax incentive program. But to the point, and we are absolutely sensitive and understand the concerns of our allies and partners about the legislation, Inflation Reduction Act. We stand ready to address those concerns. We have a US-EU task force that addresses those concerns on a regular basis and invite other allies and partners to please come to us with concerns. We're absolutely open to discuss. Thanks, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for that. I always say, those who can't keep time, I can't hire you as a TV anchor, but I'd certainly like to have you as an analyst for timing. Sometimes you have to do the biggest story of the year, and they say it's only 3 minutes. It's like, what are you talking about? I can't do that in 3 minutes. But you learn how to do it. Jane Nakasamu, I hope I'm saying it correctly, Chief Executive Officer of Greenbelt Energy. The floor is yours. Keep cognizant of the time. We're doing well, but we have 40 minutes to get through all those who have their signs up. Keep the signs upright. I've seen hands up in the back for some questions as well, so hopefully we can get to them. So let's keep up the pace. Jane, can you explain where you're from as well?
Thank you so much. My name is Jane Nakasamu, and I am the founder of Greenbelt Energy, which is a youth-led startup in Zambia that is promoting access to clean energy. I'm also a 2023 IRENA Youth Delegate, and I'm the 2022 Total Energy Startup of the Year for my country. So when I talk about a just transition for young people, we need to be able to identify and supplant young people and young innovations into already existing structures. I think one of the paradoxes that we find as young people is that when we're looking for jobs in the green economy, they want a lot of experience, but then how are we supposed to get this experience when we're not able to actually get a job in the first place? So we need to be given the opportunities not only to work within these structures, but also take a lead in it. And additionally, in our society today, young people have so many innovations, and those innovations solve some of society's biggest challenges, but we lack the capacity to scale these innovations and basically go to market. So it's really important to have strategic partnerships with public sector and private sector corporates that already have access to these markets and enable us to really deploy these transitions and have them used as well. Additionally, what I would like to highlight is that as young people, we need to be given the opportunity to take the lead as well. If we want to transition, it means that we need to be able to learn this whilst we still have people who are taking these leadership positions to show us the difference, because we can't go from one level to another without slowly growing into it. And if we want to take the lead in the green transition, the energy transition, we need to be allowed today to actually take a larger platform as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being so direct. It's refreshing to see young women in the transition as well, and also representing Panama. It's very touching. Guadalupe Gonzalez, you are the Director of Electricity for Panama. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. In name of the Secretary Jorge Rivera staff, I would like to share with you what we have done in Panama during this administration in terms of our energy policy. As you know, Panama is one of the 3 carbon negative countries that were labeled as such last year. And when we started our energy transition agenda, actually was with 2 aspects in mind, environment and people. And this is why for us, since the structuring of our energy policy, it has been worked together with the society, and for that, for us, that's an important aspect, because the development of the energy policies starts with what the people think. And we have been open with our developments. We have invited the youth, we have invited women, we have invited everybody to contribute in our policies. We have developed studies with the support of United Nations environmental programs, and we can actually see the impact that our energy transition will have for 2050. For example, just in employment, if we can actually implement our energy transition agenda, that this basically includes 5 strategies for the energy sector, 2 for hydrocarbon sectors, which include universal access, distributed generation, energy efficiency, electromobility, innovation on the power system, converting Panama as an energy hub, introducing green hydrogen. With all of that, we can see that we can increase employment by 150,000 new employments for 2050. Besides other positive impacts that we can see in the environment, in our economy, in our society. So with this in mind, we have been working and to maintain these energy policies, not only for 5 years, as is the period of the government, but constructing it to be a long-term planning strategy. And with that in mind, we created a National Transition Council that involves not only members from the government, but from the society as well, so that they can be monitoring every single month what we have been developing in our energy transition agenda. Not only that, but we have created technical committees in where everybody is invited to participate in the development of our policies and actions that have been done. We also have transversal frameworks parallel to these strategies that are based on diversity and inclusion, are based on the development and empowerment of the youth, and education. We have all mentioned these 3 pillars, and we also believe it's very, very important to include it and have it clear for our energy policies. We have a route for diversity and inclusion because we are looking to fulfill with 50% of women these 150 new jobs that can be achieved in Panama with energy transition. We developed an SDG 7 Academy where we bring young professionals to learn about not only the technology, but also communication, policies, all different areas that the young people can also need to manage in order to be communicators of our energy transition strategy. We have developed focus group where we can see that people need also to understand better the technologies that are going to be introduced in our country. Right now, it's very difficult to introduce this type of technology if you don't know how they work, if you don't know about them. There's a misconception about it, and we need to start working on that, and we have been doing that in education, training. This is why it's very important to us, and also communicating everything. I think that's the most important part so that we can have the population on board with energy transition.
You have my mic. There we go. Thanks very much. It's working. I didn't realize that the aspirations to be a hub there for Central America. It's fantastic. Speaking of communication, right? I wanted to call on our representative from Spain, Manuel Miranda, right? This is the speaker of the socialist group at the committee in Spain. Are you speaking in English or Espanol? Espanol, perfect. We have translation in Spanish, I take it? I have it in my ear, please. Thanks. Just keep cognizant of the 3-minute limit. We have 30 minutes left, and I have the private sector team that's been very patient. Thanks. Please.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. First of all, given the importance of
One second, just one, yeah. Can we get our headsets on, please, for the translation? I see most have it, and some must be speaking. What's that? Channel 4 on the translation. Thanks. Thank you for that as well. Please, sorry about that. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Once again, as I was saying, given the importance that we parliamentarians have today at the IRENA Assembly, who I'd like to congratulate, first of all, for holding this very important session, I'd like to highlight from the Spanish Senate. I have some colleagues here with me, and given the subject matter of today, I'd like to highlight, as I said, I'd like to highlight the outcome of a study that we carried out on the challenges facing sustainable energy transition, and say that energy transition, in order for it to be fair, just, and sustainable, must be based on social dialogue amongst all the actors involved, who must be involved in the transformation plans, the decisions made, and the follow-up of the implementation of these strategies. This, to our mind, is essential to all political parties. The majority supported these conclusions, and in Spain, in our parliament and our government, this line of work is extremely important. Obviously, we face challenges, and we need to have all-inclusive strategies in place to overcome the hurdles that we face in Spain. We've been working towards just energy transition. We closed in 2018 the coal mines, and this was also accompanied by the coal-fired thermoelectric energy plants. And this process is very much underway. But what has the government done in order to ensure that this transition be as just as possible? It launched a strategy with an action plan to accompany with it, and a series of urgent agreements were undertaken because of the closures of the industry and the mining. And for there to be just transition of coal mining, an agreement had to be put in place for just energy transition for that sector as well as for the thermal energy sector. We obviously are here to facilitate dialogue, and so, humbly speaking, I'd like to say that the Spanish government has created an institution for just transition, a part of a ministry, and we have put into place just transition agreements. We have a co-governance tool that guarantees our commitment and our cooperation in order to achieve our objectives. But what are the objectives of this agreement and this institution that we've created? Well, one of the most important is to ensure public participation throughout the land and those areas that will be affected by the closure of companies, in this particular instance, coal, related industries, but also in other industries that may be affected by the transition. And in the interests of time, in order for it to be a fair and inclusive and just transition, the government needs to back it, and it also needs to back it with funding. And citizens need to be at the heart of all of this, those who are directly and indirectly affected. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for transition to be just. Thank you.
I had that microphone on and off, so it's not you guys in the control room. Sorry about that. We heard from solar and wind so far. I think it's important to get the hydropower debate there, and you've been extremely patient, so thanks. You can tilt it down. And then we've got all the private sector here. I'm going to get to kind of one after another. Please, and thanks again.
Thanks very much. My name's Eddie Rich. I'm the CEO of the International Hydropower Association. I don't want to say very much because I think wind and solar have said a lot of it. We say wind, solar, water, wind, sun gets the job done. And I think we can only echo particularly what was said about licensing, about permitting, and trying to streamline those processes. But I do want to emphasize one point about the need to plan for reliability, for balance, for flexibility. And this is a difficult thing for markets to deal with. Liberalized economies are going to struggle to get away from falling back on gas and coal unless they plan. And this difficulty of the market not necessarily delivering reliability is kind of the ignored crisis within the crisis. And I think what I want to say and encourage governments to do here is to really plan for those balanced grid challenges. It can be done in state-led economies and also in liberalized. And I think there are 4 points that can be done for this in sequence. And one is to work out, with wind and solar coming more and more onto the system, right, how much long-duration energy storage are you going to need in the system to make sure that the system is going to be reliable, it's going to be balanced, it's going to be flexible at all times. So work that out. Then secondly, identify the sites where that can be done, where that can be built. And then the third, and perhaps most importantly, is work out the financial mechanism that you are going to set up to ensure that those companies that do operate in storage, in balance, are rewarded. They see some return for that investment, for that operation. And then finally, make sure that what you do is sustainable. And this is really key to the question about jobs, about consultation, about gender, and a lot of what has been spoken about. I just want to say the International Hydropower Association is there to help on all of those elements, but we really do want to emphasize the government need to plan for that flexibility. Otherwise, we're going to just stall at the moment. We should be accelerating. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thanks again for the patience on that. Rana, if I can call on you for round 21, and then we're going to go to our two on your left. please. Just remind everybody, REN 21, I'm familiar with because of Irina. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So yes, for the ones who don't know us, REN 21 is basically a community of players from government, industry, science and academia, and NGOs, all working together to basically make the renewable energy transition and deployment happen now. And I think this is the multitude of those players is a certain messiness, but let's be honest, when we're speaking about those deep structural transformation we're talking about, we need to have those players around the table. And I think we have heard it from many that when we are speaking about social dialogue, it's a question of ownership and a seat around the table to be able to participate in shaping and reimagining basically the systems we are talking about. On the transition and the transformations, I think it's our experience, and we are currently working on basically renewable energy and sustainability, the knowledge part, but also dialogue part. What we see here is that the realities in the countries differ a lot. And they do not only differ in terms of where the energy starting point is, but they also differ, and we heard it from the trade union view, for instance, on what governance is in place, what are the ownership models, what are the market models, etc. And as a result, we need to basically create a diversity of spaces where those dialogues can happen, and the secure dialogues. And I think our learning here too is that sometimes words matter and how we also position basically the discussion. So we heard it, I think, from Belize, for instance, but also from Kande about the part on energy access. The reality is that not all countries think about transformations. The transformations, if we position it, it's about building a renewable-based, secure, and equitable energy system. The other part means, however, also that for some countries, it will be transition to such a system, the ones that are depending on fossil fuel, nuclear, etc. Others do not build on this. And I think we need to basically leave this more polarized approach, but have a more differentiated part. So we heard about natural gas. So when we hear natural gas, there are natural gas producing countries, there are natural gas exporting countries, but there are also many countries that do not have natural gas in their total final energy consumption. So they do not use natural gas, and we cannot bump all those countries together just because they are on the same continent and the same region. So I think a more differentiated part. Ultimately, it is also, when we build this renewable-based system, it's about building a renewable-based and more inclusive and equitable economy. It is also about building a more inclusive society. And I think when we are basically entering those parts, it is really important that we acknowledge for the fact that our economic systems and tools, institutions partly, models, do not always reflect the realities of renewable energy. And I think that is something where it is very clear that regardless of the starting points, basically, of the different economies and countries, we need to think about what value systems we basically integrate in our economic and finance systems. And I think what we collectively need to work on, and it's partly also difficult discussions to have. I think the World Trade Organization has been mentioned, for instance, but it means about integrating in those tools the value of renewable energy. It means about integrating in those tools the societal and environmental cost of fossil fuel. And it also means integrating the fact that, let's be honest, since 20 years we were working towards a globalization, but when we are speaking about regional, more distributed renewable energy part, we need to see how we basically reflect the regionalization also in our tendering processes, access to finance, etc. And I guess in a shortcut, often we say like dominant voices determine the rules. And I think that's, when I play Monopoly with my kids, I see that they do not always like the rules of Monopoly. So to a certain extent, I think we need to reshape our renewable energy monopoly here collectively and ask the difficult questions.
Good. It's the first time I've heard about the value system in the energy sector, and the regionalization obviously come to the fore after the shocks that we've seen and the tensions between U.S. and China when it comes to trade as well, which has come to the front, especially on Russia, Ukraine. Fuad, thank you for your patience, and then we're going to go to Power for All thereafter. The floor is yours. Explain your organization, because it was the first time I was exposed to it, but it's an association for the Middle East and North Africa, but it's based in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us RECRE, the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which is an intergovernmental organization based in Cairo and serving the Arab region, MENA region, in other terms. In fact, we have been working as a strategic partner for Arab countries now for 12 years, shaping strategies, action plans, and so on around renewable energy and energy efficiency and also environmental aspects. And doing so, we were in a region that, and we are in a region that I mean the Arab region that has been, in fact, when we look into the list of countries that are fragile, conflict affected, we have been there for almost 30 years. And I think the entire world now is conflict affected. So welcome on board with us. We have been suffering from that for long, and we are still suffering, and the pressure on us is somehow higher than what you can expect. I mean the citizens, the population, in many countries that are still in the crisis mode, politically affected, wars, instability in the economic system after several revolutions, etc. In fact, let's be honest, we have a huge gap to cross when we speak about energy transition in Africa and some of the Middle East and North African countries. Huge gap. And the gap is associated with the risks that we are encountering. And tell me how investments would be attracted. And all the countries have these foreign direct investment targets to increase the share of foreign direct. How this can be there in the absence of political stability, for example, in the absence of currency stability. We have very volatile currency market right now. In the absence of the implementation capacities. And the implementation capacities here, we are speaking about the entire enabling framework around. It is not only the PPAs. We are hearing now a lot, we have the PPAs, we are planning to do auctions, we have these targets. By the way, we have combined the targets for the Arab countries, and by far they are exceeding now 60,000 megawatts over the next 13 years. Huge investments are in the pipeline, but to realize them, this is a challenge. And this is not only for Egypt, for North Africa, for Libya, for Tunisia, etc., but for all Africa. What we are seeing, we have been doing a lot of work with Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, and we are seeing this lack of implementation capacity. So we need to work on this. And this is associated also with the market structure. We cannot say that we have a good market for renewables in the absence of good power market and the energy market in general. And we need to work a lot on that. And we need to do it in our own way. We have several options to grow and to achieve our aspirations, the economic aspirations, including having gas reserves, as have been outlined earlier, including other options. But we should not repeat the mistakes of the past. We understand this. But we can do it in our own way with your support. Support us to do it rightly in the first place, but to do it with our own solution. There is no one size fits all in this regard. And here we are in the era of financial derivatives. We are securitizing everything in the world right now. When you speak about our governments, about these issues, they are far from this. They are still on the tendering phase, on the competitive auctions that have been presented kindly by Irina. But when you go into new business models, innovative finance, we are far from that. We need to build the national capacities to mobilize investment so that we would have more jobs. And again, there is a need for a paradigm shift here. I wouldn't say a paradigm shift, but we have to work on both tracks. Most of the targets are based on large utility scale projects, while the job creation is mostly on decentralized solutions. So we need to work on both tracks. We need huge amount of electricity, yes, so we need to go for utility, but also we need to go for decentralized solutions if we are considering the socio-economic impact. The last remark, we lack, as developing countries, the tools to assess the socio-economic impacts, job creation, value added, and so on. I'm aware that several countries do not have this integrated in their planning system. So unless these tools are there, they will not be able to measure which track to go, which pathway we should go in. So these are some remarks that reflecting on what have been there. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and it's a pleasure being with you all.
Thank you, Jawad. It's interesting because you're based in Cairo and they're having a $17 billion debt challenge now because of some of the major infrastructure power facilities that they've had to spend on, right? You know this whole thing with the power generation and the high-speed trains and the off-grid solutions are not part of the conversation yet in such a large economy, which is a fact. Christina Skirka, I hope I'm saying it correctly, from Power for All. Again, thanks for your patience. Then I'm going to come to our friends here at this end, and then we'll work our way. And I see you're very patient. So we're at 14 minutes. So I just ask everybody to be super focused. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Irina very much for hosting the dialogue. It's fantastic to be here. I had some comments I was going to say, but after hearing this last, I just have to build a little bit on some of the narratives that I've been hearing. And one of the things I want to stress is that we're not going to have a just transition if it's an us or them. We have to figure out a way to work with utilities. And I personally represent an organization, Power for All, so we're focused specifically on ending energy poverty by advancing the market for decentralized renewables. So we have over 300 companies around the world who are part of this effort, and it's just something to note that our sector has already created more connections in a fraction of the time on the planet than many of the largest global electrical utilities. But this idea that we can't work together, I think, is not going to help us achieve a just transition. In fact, at some time later in this weekend, I'd love a chance to talk with some of you, in particular my colleague here, about a partnership that we've created between decentralized renewables and an existing utility in sub-Saharan Africa. And now I want to switch to talking about the importance of jobs in sub-Saharan Africa in this sector. We do a jobs report, much like Irina, but we focus specifically on decentralized. And this sector is responsible right now for around 500,000 jobs, but that's accelerating quickly. And the same challenges that this sector has mirror what's going on in the rest of the energy world, right? So we're all part of a global energy system. And unparalleled, I will say, as I've been working in this sector for a couple of decades now, more and more I hear executives at both kinds of companies, whether they're centralized utilities or decentralized companies, they have the same problems. They still need more people. They need people who are better trained, et cetera. And it just occurs to me that what we've never done as a renewable community is do a full-scale, all-out effort to recruit people to this sector the same way a military would, the same way that fossil fuels have always done. We actually need to be getting people when they're young and teach them, show them, have them involved in creating their own experience around renewable energy so that we grow up an entire generation of people who see that renewables are business as usual. They're not alternative energy. So I just want to make the case for that and just echo once again that it is huge potential. There's incredible potential from an economic perspective for countries as they develop, for businesses to grow, but that will never get realized unless we make a very significant effort as a renewable energy community to recruit people, have a very serious effort to skill them, and then to place them in these jobs, which can be good jobs, but we really need a dedicated effort to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Do you not think the education systems are keeping pace? We had the same issue with the tech burst, and then it was like, how do we train the data players and the programmers? Are we waking up to the STEM job training that's needed and also university degrees? I see a lot. I'm not sure what I wanted to get your quick thoughts.
Yes, no, absolutely. But we also have to remember it's not just the technical side for the companies. There's a whole ecosystem that needs to be developed. Banks need to understand what we do, for example. So yes, and thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Christina. Stefan, you've been very patient. WWEA, and then we'll go to the World Bioenergy Association, and then Zimbabwe thereafter, please. Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Stefan Xenger. I'm from the World Bioenergy Association. We are a global umbrella organization with members in 100 countries working for a renewable energy system with wind as one cornerstone.
Okay,
I'm
just
very
sorry, Stefan, just so I know you've been patient. We only have 10 minutes left, so everybody's got to stay in time, yeah?
we try, as the previous speakers,
Okay, if you
try
see me
to
walk
keep
up
the
to
3 minutes.
your
Thank
podium, you know what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I wanted to say that I'm very grateful that Irina has taken up this really important topic of just, and I want to underline, inclusive energy transition, or I even prefer to say transformation. I want to refer to that part, to the inclusiveness. We have a unique opportunity with renewable energy to make a core part of our economy more inclusive in a way of more participation for almost everyone, because the wind and the sun is almost everywhere, and it belongs to no one or to all of us, which automatically means that there's many, many more opportunities, unlike, and I would certainly not kind of agree that we should continue with these centralized sources. We have a unique opportunity of making that accessibility beneficial through participation and through ownership, through companies which are directly investing, but also through ownership. I'm very pleased, and I would like to mention this here, that for a couple of years we've been working within the Coalition for Action in the Community Power Working Group that deals in particular with community-based, which means citizen-based ownership, and kind of first trying to understand how it works, where it works. We have understood that even in many cases, citizens and communities have been the drivers of this transformation of the energy system. We know that there are policies often not yet in place which allow that broad participation of everyone being, it's been mentioned, a prosumer. We know that regulations, policies are sometimes not open. They are discriminating against smaller investors. So it's extremely important that when we talk about the just transition, that we really look into how can we make the benefit sharing as kind of inclusive as possible through participation. That's the case, I would say, not only for the industrialized world, but also for the so-called developing countries, because people all over the world, they can become kind of the owners of the installations that we need to harvest the sun and the wind, which is for free, which is belongs to all of us, as I say. If we understand that point, that will also create an additional momentum for social support that we need so urgently. A maximum distribution of the additional benefits that we have, kind of redistributing from a highly centralized, monopolized energy system with fossil, also nuclear energy sources, to the sun, which shines everywhere. And I'm very pleased that we can take this up here, that it is on the agenda. And again, we've worked out already a couple of white papers that deal specifically with the ownership. And I'm pleased that that kind of now finds more and more attention. Thank you.
Okay. I have to say, having been involved with ARENA, I mean, the needle has moved in terms of the subject matter very, very quickly, and inclusiveness and gender, I think, especially. 10 years ago, we were having the discussion, how does the private sector get involved? Now that we have a very wide debate taking place at ARENA, which I think is commendable. I'm not going to try to mention your entire name. I'm going to leave that to you. The World Bioenergy Association, His Excellency, the Minister of Zimbabwe, is going to go after you. That was very kind of you to wait, and then I'll bring you in, okay, thereafter. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, John. My name is Bharadwaj Kumamuru. I'm from the World Bioenergy Association.
If I had to do that on air, I would have a heck of a time.
You tried that 3 years back at the previous dialogue, and it didn't work. So it's fine. It's fine.
I wised up in my older age.
Thank you. I'll skip introductions and gratitudes for now and just jump directly into the topic on how the topic of just and inclusive transition happens in the bioenergy industry. I wish to highlight 3 things. Number one, firstly, as we've seen in the IRENA's jobs report, the bioenergy sector currently employs more than 3 million people worldwide. But apart from being a job creator, at the same time, there are very good examples on the ground, such as where power companies which are switching from coal to biomass in UK, in Denmark, and in other European countries, industries in the pharma or beverage sector which are switching from natural gas to biomass heating in East Asia, but also traditional gas or coal boiler manufacturers who are shifting to biomass boiler manufacturing have all demonstrated the opportunity that the transition provides. And that is keeping most of the jobs, current jobs as it is, while at the same time creating new, decent, well-paying jobs, which of course leads to minimizing the impact of the energy transformation among the current working class, which leads to a just transition. Secondly, one of the biggest challenges we see in the energy transformation is the shift from traditional forms of biomass to modern forms of energy, and there is a lack of focus on social aspects here in that regard. One aspect we try to promote is the opportunity of using modern forms of bioenergy, that is biogas, pellets, etc., to replace firewood, charcoal in other traditional cook stoves. And what we've realized is that some of the projects do not succeed, even though they make very good economic and environmental sense. I could take an example of a community in eastern Kenya which refused to switch from firewood to biogas, which is a cleaner and cheaper fuel for cooking, mainly because of the sensitive nature of the feedstock that feeds into the biogas, which is typically animal and human waste. So here, respect to local customs, transparency throughout the process, and effective redressal systems for those local communities who are impacted by the projects are very key characteristics for a very inclusive transition. And finally, the third point I wish to highlight, a collaboration within the industry. We put out a declaration called the Glasgow Declaration on Sustainable Bioenergy, obviously launched at the COP26 in Glasgow, where we're trying to gather all the stakeholders within the bioenergy sector and to sign up on 16 principles. 4 of them are related to just transition, that is protecting and investing in local communities, ensuring safe operations, respecting indigenous people rights, and also demanding best employment practices. So we are making some of these companies to sign up on these objectives and also provide evidence base on how this is happening within their own companies. And the objective of this collaboration is twofold. Number one, highlighting best examples among the leaders, while at the same time ensuring a change in the overall sector, pushing for change in the overall sector. So we believe that such industry-wide initiatives could provide one pathway to ensure a just and inclusive transition within each industry as well. So I'll end my intervention here, and congratulations to Irina for the excellent work that's being done, and thank you.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for being very direct. Your Excellency Zemuzoda of Zimbabwe, thanks for your patience. I didn't see your sign up, but I understand that you did want to address the floor. If I can have you limit your interventions to 3 minutes, though, please. And there's a couple of very patient people in the back I wanted to call on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the moderator. Mine is just a comment, and what I'm finding from this dialogue is the need for inclusivity, especially in the journey to transitioning from the fossil fuels or the traditional fuels to clean energy. And in mind, I'm recognizing the need to involve women, to involve the youths, and just to indicate the predicament, especially for women in Africa, those that are depending on wood fuels, and assuming that we put forward this dialogue to transition without taking care of what they go through every day in making sure that livelihoods are sustainable, then this journey won't, we will not achieve what we are intending to achieve. So there is also need to give awarenesses for all the people that are affected by this transition, and also to take care of the assets that can be stranded. For instance, in the country that I'm coming from, we derive most of our energy, especially the electricity, from coal, and there has to be a plan to ensure that when we are transitioning, what are we going to do with the coal, and those people that are going to lose their jobs through the transitioning, what has to be done. I'm thinking of retraining and also the need for retooling. So I just thought there is need, I would make this comment, but all over and above what I've just indicated, for the purposes of this transition, in my country, we have already started to work on some policies like the National Renewable Energy Policy, that was promulgated in 2019, which is offering some incentives to ensure that as we are moving away from the fossil fuels, then there are some incentives for industries to quickly adopt the new technologies. We also have a biofuels policy to also make this transition to be seamless. We are currently working on an energy efficiency policy together with an e-mobility policy in our country. These are some of the contributions that Zimbabwe is making towards this conversation on just transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Minister, very quickly, if you can just keep your microphone on, are you able to get the bank support, development bank support in the transition? Out of curiosity, you want to put your microphone on? Are you able to get funding in the condition that Zimbabwe has been in economically? Are you able to raise money for the transition, out of curiosity?
It's one of our major hurdles as we journey towards transitioning for some reasons. Of course, just recently, there has been an intervention which the government has made to ensure that some of the perceived risks like currency convertibility, where investors felt they didn't want to be paid in the local currency in Zimbabwe, that has been resolved by the intervention by the central government to issue some guarantees, and also guaranteeing against default by the off-taker, which is a public entity owned by the government. So, of course, we still have challenges with the actual funding to flow into the country. But with what we have so far put together, including the incentives through the National Renewable Energy Policy and the just recently announced guarantees, we think that should allow for the flow of capital into the country.
Great. Okay, thanks for taking the question. I want to finish here, but if you can take the floor. I didn't catch your name and your organization.
Thomas Novak, thank you, John.
Thank you. You're from where?
European Heat Pump Association, so also private sector.
Put your sign down so we can see you. It'd be great.
I will.
Very quickly, and then we're going to finish with GH2.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
have good and bad news for you. The good news is, the bad news is the report is incomplete. The good news is there is at least 120,000 additional renewable jobs that come from heat pumps. They are listed under other, but they are actually a growing sector. And the important point when it comes to training and education here is that we are facing a challenge of retraining people. We have an existing heating sector in most countries, and the people that are working in this sector, they need to be retrained. And one point that wasn't mentioned so far that I find very important is we do not only need people that design, manufacture, and install the heat pumps, we also, or other renewable technology, we also need people that build the factories that are necessary for that. And at the moment, we have a big competition on skills to build factories for all these different technologies that are put into operation for the renewables transition, namely photovoltaic, wind, electric vehicles, and including heat pumps. And that's something that we really have to focus on. Thank you.
Sorry, gentlemen, I'm turning off that microphone in between my transition. Thanks for your patience on that. It's a phenomenal thing you brought up, though, because in the UK, they're trying to introduce the heat pumps, and the industry's not able to keep up with the demand that's coming. And again, we talked about communication. I think it was REN 21 and Power for All talked about communication to society as well to get them ready. But a lot of people don't even know the heat pump exists where we're living in the UK. And I know that the transition they're trying to make in Europe to heat pumps, it's just we're behind the curve, I think is what you're suggesting. Jonas, the floor is yours from GH2, and then I'm going to circle back to the industrial groups, the labor union, to conclude the debate. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, that's from the Green Hydrogen Organization. Very quickly, let's first be absolutely clear. If we're going to avoid climate disaster, we need large-scale renewable and green hydrogen economy to take off and to take off quickly. And it's not just that we're tweaking things. We are building a completely new industrial society. We're going to move where we're making steel. We're going to move where we're refilling ships. We're going to move where we make fertilizers and a lot more. The number of jobs in this industry is going to be very, very significant. For COP27, we did a study together with the UN high-level champions done by McKinsey. They thought, right, by 2050, 4.2 million jobs in Africa alone in large-scale renewable and green hydrogen economy. Now, climate clearly is not waiting. The industry is not waiting. The question we have to ask ourselves here, we are by and large, apart from our friends at Action and a couple of others, enablers. Are we doing what we can fast enough to make sure that this happens responsibly? Are we doing enough to make sure that we can fund this? We need a couple of $1 trillion. And as our friend from Zimbabwe said, the multilateral development banks, for example, have a massively important job here. So that is some partner that we must work very closely with. Lastly, John, also, these governments, Egypt, for example, trying to host some absolutely fundamentally enormous large-scale renewables and green hydrogen economy. But they need capacity. We don't know what the laws look like. We don't know what the fiscal regimes look like. So the amount of technical assistance, good international practice we need to share across our governments and so on to support these countries is absolutely key to make sure it happens responsibly. Thank you.
Yeah, the fact that you're saying we don't know the legislation and the point that you made earlier, you do need a clearer roadmap, I think. But the struggle has been even in, Egypt's discovered the natural gas, which has helped it to reduce its budget deficit. But the infrastructure spent on the major projects has really set them behind, I think, in the transition at the same time. Gunjan, if you didn't have such a warm face that's pleaded with me, I probably wouldn't have called on you, but
thank you.
You have to be very quick. And
Thank you for accommodating my...
Thank you.
The idea was really not to make a job difficult.
I'm going to explain it to Rabia because she said you do need to call on me, so thanks.
Right, so
we need to wrap.
I work at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We're one of Asia's leading think tanks, and with India hosting the G20 presidency, we're also technical advisors to about 11 ministries. The reason why I really insisted on a minute of your time, of our time, is this conversation would be lacking if we did not address the critical challenge of just energy transitions as essentially arguing for a fundamental economic transformation of emerging economies. To specifically discuss the case of India, and I'll just, off the long list, I'll just probably flag 3 points. One is we need to solve for the problem of transitioning the East-heavy fossil-rich states to the renewable energy now in the Western states. So the revenue loss and the revenue sharing. Second is subsidies offered to passenger fares because of transporting fossil fuels through the Indian railways. Yet another example is 16 to 20 million jobs dependent on fossil fuels. So it's not simply about replacing one energy source with another quote-unquote greener, cleaner energy source. It is about confronting the question of an economic transformation and how to solve for that. Thank you.
I appreciate you being very direct there. I did promise Atli I was going to come to him to get the labor voice in to finish. We'll finish at 6:45, and I just wanted to guide the team. That means we'll start gender at 7, or very, very shortly thereafter. And for those who want to come to the gender debate, it'll be from 7 to 8:30, so it'll be still 90 minutes, which I know is very important. But they also have a cocktail and a dinner, which would continue the debate, right? So we don't want to shortchange that. From an industrial all, please, Atli, you'll be very direct, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. I will definitely try. I wish to remind the industry that renewable industries have a lower union density than the industries of the traditional energy, which is a challenge in itself because a unionized job is in itself a safer, more protected job than an unorganized job. So you need to think about that. The other thing I wanted to say is that trade unions need to be involved in the development of national energy plans, of national transition plans, on the need for social policies when it comes to how the transition is cushioned, and on skilling and reskilling. And the reason for this is quite simple. It doesn't matter how technologically brilliant your solutions are or how politically smart they are. If those who are going to put them into practice do not understand and do not feel safe in the transition, knowing that they have a good place on the other side, it won't happen efficiently. So it's simple as that.
That is very direct. Thank you very much for that. And I'm glad you had a chance to intervene. I think we got almost everybody that had their placard art. We tried to be, when you talk about inclusivity and energy, we have to kind of walk the talk, right? Rabia, I think it would be remiss if, with all the work that you and the team have done, not to have you conclude our discussions. Before you do, I just wanted to single out Elvira Lopez Prados from Acciona. She's the Chief of Staff. She's been taking diligent notes over there and has pages and pages, but she's going to be putting up a summary report of the interventions we've had. So, Elvira, thank you for that. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the great moderation, as usual. Elvira, actually, from Acciona, will be reporting back to the General Assembly on the 15th, I think. It's really difficult to summarize this rich conversation, and I'm very thankful for all the input. I think I'm going to leave you just with my own personal feeling about discussions around the just and inclusive transition, which is the fact that beyond the efforts that are made by some countries who can afford to allocate funds to a just transition, there are two questions I ask myself. And the first question is, how do we achieve an energy transition that is just and inclusive when we have failed until now to mobilize resources for a just transition, in particular in developing countries? And the second question I ask myself is how we can achieve a just energy transition if the governance and institutional structures that were built under the Bretton Woods system to benefit certain regions of the world over others continue to stand, and we don't question them in the discussions that we're having. So I would like to just leave that open, and hopefully we can have a discussion maybe next year or at some other point about what is at the heart of what a just and inclusive transition means. Thank you so much for the discussion.
Thanks. And I don't want to be arrogant or make suggestions that you don't like, but I'm wondering if we should bring the multilateral institutions here, right? I think it would be, but for the next discussion and the dialogue that we have here, I think it would be a good discussion for the purposes of what gets underwritten or not in the developing world and how fast they can support. We haven't had that. That's the one area that we have not had before in the past, the multilateral institutions. So thank you for the invitation again, Rabia, and to Francesco as well, the Director General, who's been fantastic. I appreciate everybody's patience getting the questions from the floor. The gender discussion, that means that the team's got to hustle to get set up in 15 minutes. But we're going to start as close to 7 o'clock as possible. So if you'd like to be part of that discussion, you can take a break and then come right back in. Can we give a nice round of applause to the IRENA team for putting this together as well? Thanks very much. Thank you.